After dealing with a few loose ends in Chicago, Aiden embarks on his journey to a new town in Chapter 3. Given his terror of driving, his travel experience recasts his bad dream from Chapter 1. The large dark house he inherits is worth the trouble, but concerns arise in view of there being few locks on doors, especially given his occasional sleepwalking. Icarus Transfigured, Chapter 3, Stone's Throw. Graduate school seemed like a good idea at the time, but it was with a half-formed scheme that the painter entered into the arrangement. To the extent Aiden thought about the particulars of his life with regard to stratagems and long-term goals was infrequent. His life was primarily one of art, and degrees of inconvenience shaded everything else. Resultantly, he was forever falling backwards through doors that others walked through willingly. This education was as costly as it was accidental. Aiden lived in his parents' house until he was 28 and seldom left his bedroom. The move for school marked the most frightful day of his life, yet once settled, he was determined to break with the past and to be more socially engaged. What he found in his new artistic environment was an insular community that viewed his art as kitsch. The self-taught painter never heard the term before. He left graduate school with a diploma, serviceably polite references, and a mountain of debt. The only practical application of his advanced degree was teaching at the college level. But given his eclectic resume, his disinclination to exhibit, and lack of political connection, his talent gave him no leverage. The head of his undergraduate program had framed his dilemma early on when he told Aiden, in all candor, he was a genius. But then geniuses and institutions of higher learning do not traditionally get along. It was against this mixed history that the MFA graduate thought about the place he would call his new home. Being singularly preoccupied with details that last day in Chicago, the traveler left it to the final hour to inform his sister of his impending move. Even though he knew she would not be at home, it was deemed emotionally less disruptive to walk over to her house and leave a note with his new address. The brother maintained a minimal profile crossing into the yard and nimbly navigated one realty sign to reach the porch. A spare house key was hidden under a flower pot, and using it to enter the foyer, a hasty scribble was tucked under a paperweight on a bureau. He was turning back to the door when a woman's voice sprang from somewhere upstairs. His first thought was that this was perhaps his sister, but it was more likely a realty agent showing the house to a prospective buyer. He closed the front door quietly behind him. Aiden returned to his apartment with a rental trailer hitched to his car. Everything but a few loose ends was packed up, so loading commenced from the curbside. The operation was carried out with due concentration and with utmost regard being paid to the evil neighbor's movements down the hall. The apartment door was locked with each trip in and out of the house. Near the end, the laborer noticed another box, not his, around the corner on the stoop of the vacant apartment. Someone was moving in as he was moving out. No one was seen inside the dark entryway, and no name tag hung on the mailbox. The concerned neighbor stepped up to toss, in a greeting, "Hello?" light around a door through the shadow of a large box onto the wall. With incorrigible curiosity, Aiden eased forward to peek over its open flap. The strange object inside resembled a giant piñata, or something boulder-like made of papier-mâché. A young Hispanic woman with a child clinging to her skirt stepped forthrightly into view from the bathroom. It was too late to undo the trespass. The snoop apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't see anyone."
"Neighbor?"
she asked. "Yes, I mean no, not anymore." Her nervous laugh was gentle.
"My English is not good."
"No, it isn't. I mean, my English is not good," he blundered. She was confused. The shy little girl darted under a black velvet painting of Jesus, praying in the garden at Gethsemane. Evading eye contact, the intruder looked first to his shoes and then to the floor past where the woman stood. Bits of plaster lying beneath the nailed-shut door directed him to unobstructed sunlight, which now pierced its keyhole. Aiden gestured dramatically at the barrier, thrusting a finger at the peephole, and then two back at his eyes. "Neighbor," he charged in pidgin English, somewhat condescendingly. "He spy on you." The young woman registered proper alarm.
No.
"Yes," he said. She too pointed, only at the refrigerator.
Would you like something to drink?
Her finger glittered in the light of a jostled window curtain. The ring might have been a wedding band or some other ring. He demurred. The daughter was now hiding behind the drapes, playfully mimicking his facial expressions and mouth movements through the thin weave of the fabric. Distracted, Aiden glanced at the only bed in the one-room apartment and wondered where the child would sleep. The mother pushed a box aside, ready to entertain company. Aiden, never spontaneous in social situations, pawed at the floor before retreating from this prospect. He surveyed more boxes in passing to the door, yet could not say what he expected to see in them. His goodbye was awkward. The young woman's goodbye was air under his shoes. When he looked back from the yard, the window curtain swayed from where the child quit her hiding place. One of the many ironies of the painter's life was, in spite of having an affinity for maps, he hated traveling. As indicated by his disinterest in attending college, Aiden had no desire to learn how to drive until his mother, volunteering her time as instructor, gave him no option. Sedatives were not needed when he drove, although the first occasion of a new route was stressful. Stone's Throw was admittedly close and small, yet the worried motorist was determined to map every mile marker and exit ramp along the way before setting out. His fear was being in a wreck or becoming stranded. So, having knowledge about landmarks in his journey gave him a semblance of control. His knuckles were bone white on the steering wheel once he ran out of avenues with presidential names. Road construction greeted him on the Dan Ryan, and he was quickly sandwiched between a line of semis and rebarred concrete. Construction work ended before expressway turned to potholed interstate, and he was paying such diligent attention to mile markers that he almost missed the mangled dog carcass in the median strip. Signs advertising fireworks and adult movies marked the unofficial end of the suburbs, although the easing terrain did not necessarily calm the driver. Further south than he was going, over the Indiana state line, was the flattest, windiest landscape known to him from his school days. For a moment, the motorist thought another dead animal was coming into view on the shoulder, but it was a scuffed paper grocery sack floating toward him in a gust. It first resembled a somersaulting man, and then a skittering crab as it passed under his wheel. It blew out the back of the car in a shot, though before it was seen to taunt the next driver, Aiden exited the interstate to begin the last leg of his trip. He was immediately on a winding two-lane road and stuck, inconveniently, behind a house on a flatbed trailer. The obstacle was wide and impassable, and nothing was visible of the rig hauling it. The traveler saw virtue in acclimating to the slower rural pace, though this improvement came sooner than he desired. When the highway split, house and car went their separate ways. Aiden glanced across the widening divide to see tattered curtains blowing from a paneless window, and thought the chintz fabric, or someone standing just on the other side of it, waved at him. He did not draw his first full breath until he crossed into the idyllic town. Owing to a late start, it was nearly dusk before the mover found the address furnished by the lawyer. A footpath covered in scarlet and copper leaves led into a courtyard facing a quadrangle of dwellings. The one bearing his number was nearest the entrance. An ash tree of grim aspect made the tall, narrow structure it sheltered resemble a mirthless fairy tale cottage. Gingerbread shingles and glaucous vines supplied counterpoise. Aiden felt himself drawn into the atmosphere, stepping toward the door with key in hand. A small wood plaque greeted him. Spyglass Darkly House. A folded note wedged between the knob and doorframe read, Mr. Gauge, electricity in the house is off until sometime tomorrow. Sorry for the inconvenience. Here are some things to aid you. If you need to call me, a payphone is down the block at the sandwich shop. Welcome, caretaker Andrew Tommen. A box of assorted candles lay inside the entryway, along with a matchbook. Aiden was too excited by his new prospect to be inconvenienced. The rooms were spacious, and in the dipping light, ceiling beams resembled dark-hued veins. The furnishings were vintage 50s, including molded furniture, synthetic wool upholstery, burlap lampshades, and an old tube bearing television in the living room. The decor was incongruous with the Tudor architecture, though the furniture was too well preserved to be cast-offs from student renters. On completing a cursory inspection of the property, the tenant settled on the huge attic with its skylight as the best room to set up his studio. Lumber and art supplies comprised the bulk of what was brought from Chicago, and taken together his belongings made little impression on the house. Due to the lack of electricity, he was eager to move his materials up the 2 flights of stairs before darkness prevailed. Twilight was almost immediately on the steps, and halfway through the unpacking, the diminished visibility required stopping to light several candles. He placed them along the stair treads and resumed his effort. Taloned flames flicked at his pants cuffs on each trip up and down the creaking staircases. And with the onset of night, they grew bolder by throwing his shadow higher on the well walls. When a quitting place was reached, the resident walked back down from the top stair and blew out each candle in turn. The remaining torch was carried into the kitchen, where the still early hour was contemplated. Aiden was not tired, though the darkness left him few options. A thorough examination of the house would have to wait on daylight. After turning in his rental trailer, the new citizen parked his car downtown to stroll. Purcell College, a large private school, was Stone's Throw's primary reason for being, and accounted for half its population of 40,000. As a result, the local economy was mostly an artificial one due to the students' infusion of cash. There were a number of ethnic restaurants and stylish boutiques, but little else. Like most college towns, Stone's Throw had a pedestrian-friendly layout, and the main drag would be an easy hike by foot from his house. Broadway was the principal street and ran parallel to the campus. Several blocks of small storefronts made up the town side, including a copier place, a vintage clothing store, and, thankfully, the coffee house. The name of the establishment was Bean and Nothingness, and it possessed a bohemian patina that Aiden adored. He stepped into what would become his home away from home and sighed with relief. Coffee houses by night, he thought, were more alluring than their daytime counterpart. Night pressing against the bright windows put one in mind of ancient campfires buried deep in the memory of skin. On receiving his latte, the patron moved to the condiment bar to doctor his drink. Unfamiliar locations, where unfamiliar people were bound to congregate, made him self-conscious. Yet the practically housebound man was eager to push through this awkward initiation by learning where everything was: bathroom, waste can, aspartame, etc. So he would appear at ease. He naturally wished to minimize his profile and kept his mannerisms staid and close to his body and never took big or hurried steps. Similarly, he avoided eye contact until shielded by the blind of a regular table. He deemed it safe to peek out at others. His journal was a reliable companion on these outings, and the routine of working in it gave him cover to justify being alone. This activity also gave his eyes and hands something to do, and such activity would likely strike onlookers as nothing out of the ordinary. Aiden gravitated to a window seat and envied young couples moving in and out of the shadows on the sidewalk. All were wrapped arm in arm with unuttered destinies tugging at their bodies. The form of them, so close to the panes, was enough to have him anticipating his own hopeful fate. In caffeine-induced moments, he longed to close distances, or at least to entertain the thought that this was the most desirable of things. He jotted down a few first impressions in his journal. A poster of Millet's pre-Raphaelite masterpiece, Ophelia, occupied the wall across from him. In the painting, Shakespeare's doomed heroine floats face up in mossy water, suspended halfway between a living reddish-green earth and one brown, desiccated, and dead. Her wrists break the water's surface in a Christ-like attitude. Wildflowers, mimicking blood, trickle from one hand and down the front of her gold-threaded gown. Elizabeth Siddal was the model for the work, and was reported to have posed in a bathtub kept warm by placing a lamp beneath it. Before leaving the coffee house, a scribbled advertisement soliciting for an artist model was left on the community bulletin board. The painter was turning over more than one new leaf. He shortly returned to the house, and on relighting the candle on the kitchen table, proceeded upstairs to the bedroom. The substantial bed imposed with its four flanking ebony posts. The candle holder was placed on the dresser beside it. Aiden hoped, given his exhaustion, he would fall asleep without difficulty, yet worried about his new environment in view of his occasional sleepwalking. It was always easy enough to lock himself in his small, one-room apartment in Chicago, but this bedroom door had no lock. The idea of tumbling down dark stairs would be an unfortunate beginning to his occupancy here, so it was advisable to block the door with a piece of furniture. When he went into the hallway to retrieve a chair, he noticed a painting passed in haste while hauling boxes upstairs. He brought the candle out for a closer look. The image was of a black box resting on white drapery. It resembled an antique phone with a rotary dial and sprouting funnel for an earpiece. The humorous work reminded the painter of French surrealist René Magritte, though the brushwork was more old master than modern. With his eye for reverse engineering art, Aiden deduced that the silky texture of the cloth was achieved by a meticulous overlaying of flake white scumblings. Two complementary tints, likely chrome yellow and ultramarine blue, were blended into these using thickened stand oil to produce a warm gray, which completed the milky agate effect. A transparent glaze of Prussian blue finished the opaque Mars black box. All told, it was a well-crafted oil painting, though dulled by dirty glass and a dreary frame. The title on the brass engraving added to its enigma, The Ghost in the Machine, by Daedalus Monet. Between this work and the poster at the coffee house, the artist was too exhilarated to sleep. Still, he was ready to retire, so wedged the chair under the doorknob to secure the door. The view out his bedroom window was unusually dark. Even allowing for the rural character of the town, it seemed strange only one lit window was visible over the roofs of Willis Quadrangle. It shone from the top floor of a Victorian house and revealed, through parted curtains, a half-dressed woman pacing nervously with a phone pressed to her ear. The resident had already set about unpacking a few essential toiletries when he stumbled over his own telephone. There was no hurry to do so, but seeing a wall jack conveniently by the bed table, he plugged in the power cord. It was rare when he got a phone call, and even rarer when he made one. Yet he was embarking on a new adventure that might imaginably require a telephone. The candle at his back was impatient and snapped with annoyance. So after brushing his teeth, he crawled into bed and blew out this last vestige of his day-long journey. No sooner did his head sink into the pillow than cracks and moans of the unfamiliar house reminded him of one crucial detail. His fan, he did not load it into the trailer. Aiden turned on the bed, stirring up thoughts like dander. Did the evil neighbor steal it when he was not looking? Though no electricity was in the house, he would need to buy a new fan at his earliest opportunity. He turned again, following what must have been the scampering tread of mice in the attic. The quietude threw up no additional fences that needed tending, and it was akin to free fall. Aiden occasionally twisted in the sheets, but eased back into the placid picture. The phone on the bed table chirped. He struggled to move his arm, and then to find a hand at the end of it. The bedpost dropped away like a gangplank and sent him flying off the bed. The high-pitched ping emanated from the ceiling, not the bed table. Covering his ears, he leapt up to his feet and yelled. Being directly under the screeching smoke alarm, he ripped it off its screws and hurled it to the floor in a rage. The alarm struck the table leg before shooting under the bed. He was quickly on all fours groping under the bed skirt for the hateful item, but could not lay a finger on it. When he rose with another curse, the battery-operated device ceased its racket. The sobering moment allowed him to catch up with his rash act. Aiden was easily upset by sudden sharp sounds, yet could not think what triggered the sensor. He followed the glowing threads of the floorboards to the window and threw open the sash. His olfactory sense was almost as sensitive as his hearing, but nothing in the air merited alarm. Closing the window, he spied something dark slumping against the exterior clapboards below. It might have been a rat or a rabbit. A breeze pinched its mangy fur like dandelion tufts. Was it sickly or dead? The full brunt of his fear sank in only when the creature, with its eyes closed, rose to slink away along the wall. He watched its flat shadow climb higher on the outside of the house like scorching smoke. The form was as big as a bear by the time it disappeared around the corner. Unnerved, Aiden latched the window and turned to the block door. He wanted to check the hall and make sure none of the candles on the stairs had rekindled, yet could not trust he was awake, could not rule out he was sleepwalking. He retraced his steps to the bed, resolved, reluctantly, to leave any monster on the other side of the door. Aiden is eager to explore his new town, yet quickly meets with unanticipated obstacles. Each character presented in Icarus Transfigured may be regarded as a prism through which the fractured autistic life plays out. These characters range from the comical to the unsettling to potentially the life-changing. Yet Aiden is determined to keep these strangers at arm's length, but circumstances overtake him. The terrifying conclusion of Chapter 5 cast his new house in a troubling light. While out of his house, he has reason to believe that it is not uninhabited. The Forerunner, Part 1. The remainder of Aiden's sleep was restful and might have extended longer except for glimpsing someone sitting at the foot of his bed. A pretty little girl with straight, combed brunette hair stared at him intently. A gentle ray of sunlight illuminated her pink Sunday best dress.
Can I watch cartoons on your TV?
She inquired. He shot a glance at the bedroom door. The chair was still propped against it. Shoving the covers to his feet, he blurted, "How did you get in here? What's your name?"
Bray.
"Are you a neighbor, Bray?" Her head bobbled, circling a nod. Fetching his slippers, he queried further, "Can you show me how you came in?" The child dropped from her perch and stepped into the walk-in closet. She pulled on a hinged dressing mirror to expose a tenebrous opening in a wall. Aiden fended off claustrophobia and followed her through a narrow passageway to a crack of daylight at the other end. When she pushed on a second panel, more light revealed a dingy black suitcase blocking the path. The slight child readily maneuvered around it, yet on confronting the obstacle, the resident fetched it out of the closet and left it in the adjoining room, which appeared to be another bedroom. Flabbergasted, he caught up with his trespasser in the hallway and questioned her again at the stairs. "How did you get into my house?"
I followed you in.
she said. Bouncing down the steps ahead of him, Aiden shuffled behind the tap of her patent leather shoes. He found her next in the living room, staring moodily at his television. "I don't have electricity," he informed her. "Not until later, anyway." Bray ceased flipping the unresponsive channel knob, though her pout was impervious to adult reasonableness. Seeing her disappointment, he persuaded his apparent neighbor to join him in the kitchen. She clambered up a chair and poked her head over the formica table edge in the manner of a Raphael cherub. Half a sticky bun was handed her on a plate. Aiden leveraged his bribe. "Are there any more secret doors in the house?" The girl nibbled quietly around the edges of the pastry. She may as well have been garden statuary given the bachelor's ineptitude at reading children. The gooey treat sufficed to distract Bray all of 10 minutes, and after sending her merrily on her way, the resident returned to his bedroom to dress and nail shut the hidden panel in the closet. There was little evidence beyond the testimony of a child of no acquaintance that he had sleepwalked through not only a narrow corridor, also unknown to him, but down a dark staircase to exit the house. It seemed probable that Bray, accustomed to using the premises, fabricated the story on finding his back door unlocked. In haste and fatigue the previous night, he left it unlocked. This seemed the most likely scenario, especially given the bright, untroubled sunshine beckoning through the window curtains. With the dilemma rectified in his mind, the artist was desirous to explore his new city, so stepped out the back door. He was met on the stoop. The apologetic man introduced himself as Andrew Tomlin, the caretaker for Willis Quadrangle. He expressed regret about the power situation and about not being able to call the prior day, yet he was eager to see the new denizen comfortably settled. An opportunity presented itself to voice concern about the possibility of mice in the house. Mr. Tomlin looked doubtful, but said he would set traps to allay any fears. Neither man was inclined to small talk, so the painter picked up his adventure where it left off. It was important for Aiden to make a safe map of the town. This was done not only to have a familiar and tested route to travel each day, but also to guard against appearing lost, out of place, or presumptuous wherever he should go alone. Such considerations, like his rehearsed replies and inconspicuous manner of dress, were pressing and paramount for the socially uneasy man. For the time being, at least, the beauty of his neighborhood was the one thing on which he could agreeably resolve his mind. These houses did not resemble the flimsy rental properties seen driving into town the day before. Here, tiered gardens, slate walkways, and sycamore trees graced a hillock and recommended a population of well-heeled professors and administrators of Purcell College. The yards were so tastefully maintained that when the walker spotted a tacky-yard gnome in one, he was drawn to it. He quickly realized it was a diminutive man caked in white grease paint, sporting winkle-toed shoes and fake whiskers. Another person with a camcorder stood across the street and presumably filmed reactions of passers-by. Aiden did not want to get caught up in it, so continued up the lane to enter the main campus. Spidery ivy crawled over the college's Gothic architecture, and stone gargoyles peered down from roofs between the branches of formidable oaks. There was little austerity to the buildings otherwise, due to the use of a warm native limestone. Brick footpaths appeared inviting but for thick autumnal foliage, which was falling faster than groundspeople could rake it up. Unexpectedly, A gaunt figure with a metal detector and garbage bag emerged ahead. He neither looked nor smelled like a groundskeeper. His raspy question came out of nowhere. "What are you supposed to tell Gort?" The pedestrian felt crowded whenever anyone cut him off on the sidewalk, but it was unthinkable that the guilty party should also impose on his thoughts. He endeavored to be civil. "Pardon?" "What are you supposed to tell Gort?" was repeated with less patience. The older man wore an eye patch, pantaloons, and a grubby tailcoat. A parrot, mummified under several coats of fluorescent green spray paint, was perched on his shoulder and held in place by a wire coat hanger. Aiden knew the term Gort well. It was from the film The Day the Earth Stood Still. He supplied the rest of the phrase. "Gort, klatu barada nikto." The fellow's furrowed face softened as he was about to laugh, but the gauge on his metal detector required attention. "Those be metal grommets in your shoe, matey?" he inquired in pirate speak. Aiden stared at his feet in the unlikely possibility they were. The treasure hunter was brusque. "Then stand aside. You be parked on me booty." He reached down to fetch a flattened soda can and gave the taller man a good looking over into the bargain. "Ye must be the remote man I hear tell about. They didn't think I were listening." The liquored vagrant may have been in character. His pirate getup could only be in anticipation of Halloween. "I seen him around town wearing black overall," he continued, "shopping at the low-end stores on the west side and keeping a low profile." Aiden looked down the sidewalk for an escape. The man was unfazed by the cool reception. "They been living out of a suitcase mostly, I spec." He set his bulging bag down to drop a can into it and glanced, with curdled expression, at the baffled newcomer. "You know the suitcase? The one they carry the face of God round in?" "Like the Shroud of Turin?" The man turned disagreeable. "I know what the Shroud of Turin be, matey. I were there when they wrapped Jesus up in it like a Brooks Brothers suit. No, what I be talking about were the continents of the Almighty." Aiden pretended to understand. "They needs a body, course," the pirate stated matter-of-factly, "to make the big handoff from the man upstairs to us mere mortals. They needs a remote man. They had me in their sights for a while, like seagulls, circling a baby, left too long in a stroller. But I be sleeping under a different viaduct ere night, sleeping under 10 feet of concrete. They moved on to greener waters." "So, is being a remote man a bad thing?" A young woman just then walked by, prompting the landlocked seafarer to lift his detector and wave it briskly over her purse in an exploratory way. She threw him a cutting stare, but it barely registered. Without missing a beat, he explained. "I weren't wont to be in your shoe. Let's leave it at that. They didn't pick ye out of a phone book, you know. Best batten down the hatch. Check your storm winders. They be enterprising, ambidextrous. They'll find a way to get into your house, like those roaches that eat your stereo equipment. They may have already found ye as B, so don't write your social security number down on anything. Walk home a different way each night. Keep your eye open. They may assume any form." "What about mice?" "What about 'em?" "I have mice in my house. I've heard them." There was a squint. "Do they talk to ye?" "Not yet." The man bristled. "Then they just be damned mice. Don't waste my time with it." He quickly reconsidered. "That's the way The Exorcist started, you know. The mother heard mice in the attic." "I thought it was rats." "Look, matey, I be trying to put you in the know. Put you in the paint with 5 seconds left on the shot clock." He tarried to fling the bag over his shoulder. "Another thing, the name be an anagram." "That's from Rosemary's Baby, right?" "Never heard of it." Once the prognosticator charged off, Aiden was free to resume his walk, though perhaps with less enthusiasm. The just-arrived coffeehouse patron approached the counter, but before he was able to order, he spotted his journal in a lost-and-found box by the register. "That's mine," he blurted. The woman at the espresso machine did not match his excitement, saying only,
Someone turned it in last night.
Aiden picked up his book, unable to account for his absent-mindedness. He was relieved to have recovered it, and with his thank you, took his latte to the same window seat as his previous visit. The idea someone might have perused his writing was unsettling. It was not simply someone seeing what he wrote that disturbed him, but how he wrote. His handwriting was barely legible. More incriminating was his incessant rewriting of passages. His way of working bore little resemblance to recognizable practices of a given creative discipline. And to the degree he crossed paths with other proficients pursuant to these interests, he never ceased feeling like an imposter. He resisted sharing his achievements for fear the unorthodox means by which he came to them might be discovered. A pen was fished from his jacket pocket, and the moment of regearing provided an opportunity to size up the landscape by daylight. A puce-colored thrift store sofa sat near the entrance. A Jim Jarmusch film flyer was taped over the condiment bar. Nina Simone played on the speaker system. As for the patrons, students were scattered over the premises and trawling for a better wireless connection. There were even a few barnacled, unwired men his age on exhibit. Every detail was an archetype of coffeehouse society he knew well, and maybe on another, less happy day, too well. Late in his writing, the dwarfish yard gnome still in costume came in to get a coffee to go. He eyed the new townie in a friendly way. Aiden sized him up as another person to be avoided. Undeterred, the man strolled up to his table with his beverage.
"You must be the new artist in residence. I saw you pull your trailer into Willis Quadrangle yesterday."
A chalky hand was extended.
"My name is Jacques Chrétien. I'm a performance artist over at the college."
Aiden rose to cordiality. Jacques casually pulled up a seat.
"That place you moved into used to be the home of the architect and designer Daedalus Monet.
"I don't know much about him," the painter confessed.
He is the subject of many apocryphal accounts, but his greatest accomplishment is a miniature golf course not far from here."
The sight of the performance artist in the window turned few heads, but Aiden, embarrassed by his presence, joked nervously, "You look like a powdered donut about to dunk yourself in your coffee." The performance artist explained between slurps,
"Believe me, I get all kinds of remarks in this outfit. Documenting them is the whole point of what I do."
"I see. Society's reaction to nonconformity." Jacques grinned with self-mocking.
"That's how I originally pitched it. But now I say it's about how vertically challenged folks are viewed as dehumanized novelties in our culture."
"Has it worked?" Sighing, he related,
"There aren't enough angry dwarfs in the world to achieve critical mass on making shortness a recognized victimology. So funding's been a slog."
He sallied on.
"I pose in the better off yards mostly, although I think I'm just pissing off the college faculty while they're doing yard work. One professor recently ran me off with an electric hedge trimmer."
A bandaged hand was held up.
"Artists get no respect, not even from tenured professors."
"I should think caffeine would be a liability for a man in your line of work, what with jitters and bathroom breaks."
"Decaf."
The man interposed, tapping his styrofoam cup.
"Besides, I'm practiced at being invisible."
The painter glanced around the indifferent room for confirmation. Jacques threw an inquisitive eye back across the table.
"What are you writing?"
Aiden shrugged evasively. "A memoir, I think."
"A memoir?"
puzzled the performance artist.
If you spend all day in coffee houses, you're not going to have much of a life to write about.
True. Jacques was dry.
The ideal of coffee houses is one where everyone wears berets and argues about French poetry, but this place is an outpatient clinic.
The tables being turned, Aiden defended his own life choices. For people like me, hanging out in coffee houses is the solitude of angels, and only occasionally pathetic.
I suppose we're all posing in this world.
The seasoned coffee house frequenter waxed on it. I would say each regular who shows up gets a table, an allotment of caffeine, and as much time as they need to sit and stoically justify their existence in the universe. When they abandon their wishful sandcastles to make room for another, the tide moves in and busses the table. Jacques cut to the chase.
Of course, there are always cute girls to look at in the meanwhile.
He ogled a prettyish barista behind the counter and commented acerbically.
That's Erica. She's a local dead-ender, one of those off-the-shelf bohemian types with more piercings than sense.
With this condemnation, he rose to leave. Aiden seized his second opportunity of the day. Do you know a good place to rent a camcorder and tripod? Jacques beamed.
I can do better than that.
The two men walked off campus to where the graduate student lived in a ramshackle trailer. The small tract of land around it was landscaped with spastic handfuls of potting soil. Ceramic geese marked its corners, while plastic petunias in small pots, still bearing price tags, dotted the property line. On ducking through the doorway, the ferruginous decor continued inside. The narrow enclosure was dark, dank, and possessed the unmistakable, sickly sweet detergent smell of dried semen. An uncooperative, fitted sheet covered 3/4 of a thin, mildewed mattress of Spartan economy. A splintery plywood board and cinder blocks supported this makeshift cot, while Kleenex-like crustaceans were sprinkled liberally over a pile of pornographic magazines underneath it. Jacques was pulling together video equipment when he caught his guest eyeing his handiwork. He quipped,
That's my origami collection.
Aiden smiled uncomfortably in lieu of a verbal response and turned his attention to stacks of video cassettes against a warped wall. A corroded-over hot plate, also in need of elevation, was almost tripped over in spotting toothpaste spittle and strands of discarded dental floss among the clutter. The painter had known poverty, but never such hopelessness. The tenant intruded on his thoughts.
This recorder makes a noise when it rewinds, so don't be alarmed by it.
The borrower accepted the caveat and inquired, Why don't you use digital recorders for your work? Jacques' defense was quick and rehearsed.
For the same reason a painter brandishes a paintbrush and not a computer mouse. Analog is pure.
What will you do when they stop making parts for VCRs? The host declaimed.
The Cubans have been making workable transportation out of obsolete automobiles for decades. When cockroaches inherit the earth, they will barely notice. When the power grid goes down and computers become doorstops, I will still be able to point to my heap of cassette boxes and count them off like venerable tree rings.
The skeptical painter glanced around the room. None of the tapes were labeled. Jacques slapped one cassette into the video camera.
You can record over this old one.
Aiden was handed the camcorder and tripod and was about to leave when the lender extended an invitation.
A professor is throwing a Halloween wingding tonight for the fine arts students. His house is near where you live. It would be a good chance for you to meet some of the locals. Interested?
The retiring man normally stayed clear of such things, but seeing he was turning over a new leaf and the fellow artist had helped him out, he was agreeable. With everything tucked under his arms, Aiden ducked out the door, determined not to let the squalid detour of the trailer detract from his good mood. He basked in the purgative sunlight until he reached the grove of his neighborhood, where he thought late afternoon shadows caught up with him too soon. He searched each curiously in passing. and found one comprised entirely of black, studious crows in the spreading bower of a blue ash tree. None as much as cawed or fluttered, and having crossed under their gathering unmolested, he entered the quadrangle. The Forerunner. Part 2. A continuing power outage confronted Aiden on his return to the house. He nevertheless set up the borrowed video equipment at his bedside for later use. In the interim, he was eager to take advantage of the remaining daylight, so moved to his studio without further delay or excuse. A CD of Schubert's piano impromptus was cued in the portable player, and he began preparing his materials for work. The painter did not fully embrace the idea that he was an artist until he entered college. His undergraduate work was a hodgepodge of approaches, which reflected what he was exposed to in his art history survey courses. He cross-pollinated styles and epochs, first through reverse engineering. It was not until his last year of graduate school that he settled into the role of serious oil painter, although he was never interested in current trends in contemporary painting. Regarding his mature style, Aiden liked painting unconventional monsters. These monsters were an inspired updating of the composite-style portrait created by 16th century Italian painter Giuseppe Arcimboldo. This love of descriptive surfaces carried over from boyhood, where early drawings of monsters evolved in the manner of elaborate maps. This desire for greater detail made his initial canvases as a young painter claustrophobic and impenetrable, which was not improved by his tendency to violate eyes or omit them entirely. It was esoteric work that attracted few admirers. His disparate achievements made him both overqualified and underqualified for any career he should entertain. Apart from writing his own job description, there was no job to attach to what he did. The painter's new creation had enough foothold in the world to merit a sense of accomplishment. He returned downstairs after cleaning his brushes and spotted his calendar still lying on the kitchen table in want of a nail. While he contemplated where to hang it, he realized with consternation that it was his nephew's 8th birthday. His balancing act between unequal spheres of memory, namely between remembering items of his leisure and those of his responsibility, meant the latter was often left off. Were he to excuse himself, the forgetful uncle might blame his move from Chicago for taking him out of his routine. Dinner required him leaving the house, so a decision was made to call his nephew from the payphone up the street. Gathering momentum, Aiden entered the dimming living room to find Bray standing in the middle of it. A dark cerise dress, like a duvetine curtain, had concealed her presence. The child held up a paper sack and, with a calculated look, informed him,
I got no holes for eyes.
The startled neighbor looked over the contents of the bag, which contained a plastic-wrapped bedsheet. Assuming Bray alluded to the makings of a Halloween costume, he concluded, So you're wearing a ghost suit, huh? Her moon face and large blue eyes hit their mark. Prodded by a seldom tapped parental pang, Aiden was cajoled. I think we can manage a couple of eye holes. The would-be couturier was not sure in which unpacked box he would find his scissors, and with no patience to guess, he charged to the attic to retrieve a utility knife from his toolbox. On his return, he smiled affably while negotiating the bounding folds of white cotton. The fabric's immensity made him scrutinize, belatedly, the discarded wrapper. Bray, he fretted, this is for a king-size bed, and more sheet than a little girl needs. The sweet child stood at his knee and watched him make 2 rough eye holes with uncritical appreciation. He pulled the cover over her head to align the holes before dropping to the floor to trim away excess material. Returning to the sofa, he playfully yanked down the eye holes and twirled her around. Bray fumbled before falling on his lap in a burst of giggles. It was only with her leaning forward that a bleeding cut above her ankle was noticed. The neighbor pulled the sheet off her in a gasp. "Did I do that?" The girl said nothing. Aiden returned from the bathroom with a Band-Aid and rubbing alcohol. He patched up Bray with effusive apologies, though it was clear she was not going to make a fuss over the injury. Still seeking forgiveness, he left the room a second time and returned with a box of crayons kept back from childhood. They were placed on the coffee table, along with a piece of paper and a lit candle to chase away gathering shadows. Twilight was soon on the windowsill, but Aiden was so completely under his neighbor's vespertine spell that he did not budge. He was hard-pressed to explain what he felt, although it resembled contentment. After a while, concern over seeing the child safely home roused him from their shared company. Bray was reluctant to put down her crayon. The host examined her drawing. "What is it?"
An angel. I saw it in the window.
she explained. Aiden did not press her on specifics. Bray pushed into his leg to eye her masterpiece. Without premeditation, he reached down and pulled her into his lap in a fatherly way. She unfurled in his arms to cuddle, and he was both overwhelmed by the boldness of his move and the tenderness of her embrace. The child looked over her knees to the bandage, feeling a natural fit in the curve of his body. Confused, he relinquished the unguarded moment and let gravity reclaim her. He stood up with an adult's tilting gaze and grimaced. "It's almost dark. Let's put your drawing on the refrigerator." His new friend was escorted to the refrigerator for a gallery installation of her artwork, and then to the back door. The reticent child paused in the doorway.
Can I come over in the morning and watch cartoons?
Aiden thought on it. The electricity may still not be on. Bray seemed set on the idea. "I'll leave the door unlocked for you." She was satisfied. The last of the sun squinted through trees running along the western facade of the property. The lowest branches resembled lead solder between panes of stained glass, in how they separated deepening shades of madder and lapis lazuli. The effect was one of hastening an anxious nightfall. With Bray's hand in his, the pair walked the leafy path to another dark house in the quadrangle. She stepped on the stoop and pushed a heavy, unfastened door. Engulfed by shadow in the entryway, her crimson dress pleats glowed and drew off the bloom in her cheeks. Aiden looked over the opaque, moribund windows of the house. "Are your parents home?" No reply was given. He could not account for his next question. "Is your mommy or daddy taking you trick-or-treating for Halloween?" Bray's shrug was non-committal. The confirmed bachelor cleared his throat. "If they can't take you, I'll take you. Okay?" The girl nodded before disappearing inside the dwelling. The neighbor backed away slowly, watching the door close and waiting for a light to switch on. When one was not forthcoming, he glanced at the mailbox. No name was on it, but a letter inside was addressed to the caretaker of Will's Quadrangle. Bray was presumably Andrew Tommen's daughter. Seeing that he did not know the situation of this latchkey child, he could not interfere, so turned back onto the leafy path. Having found the sandwich shop recommended by the caretaker, Aiden ordered his meal. He sat in a cozy window seat, which afforded a view of his darkening house up the block. The events that brought him to this fortune were still thought improbable. Once sustenance was achieved, there was no other excuse to procrastinate. The uncle moved outside to drop a few coins in the payphone at the curb. The painter was not a family man. He seldom interacted with his father, and because the two men were so much alike that they had little in common. When his younger sister Miranda was born and brought home from the hospital, Aiden, then 4, reportedly took one look at his new baby sister and left the room without comment. He did not engage her again until she began to crawl. He could only justify his detachment in rarefied artistic terms. Although this disposition was challenged by the birth of a special needs nephew, Aaron, who required as much forbearance as demonstration of familial regard. Aiden expressed no more sentiment as an uncle than he had as either a son or a brother, although he made some small show at all 3. Aaron, for his part, was not a cuddly boy. He had a predilection for small-scale thievery and peppered his disjointed, monotone speech with phrases picked up from television. He was in the habit of chewing on his shirt collar and given to hiding from company in strange places, as evident by his collection of upholstery staples and nickel slugs punched from electrical boxes. In many ways, he was like the other men in his family, yet differed significantly in one respect. He insisted on family interaction. Aiden regretted he did so little to add qualitatively to his nephew's life, but the duty-bound uncle always called the child on his birthday. His sister picked up the other end of the phone, and before she spoke, her youngest, Amelia, was heard raising a ruckus in the background. Aaron made a pass at penitence. "Sorry, Miranda, I forgot to buy Aaron a present." It was hard to tell if Miranda was ever angered by her brother's lack of family feeling. "It's okay, Aiden. Aaron just likes to hear from you."
"I should have sent him a card, at least."
"But you called."
He changed the subject. "Have you found a buyer for the house yet?"
"The market is fairly bleak at present, but I'm taking in a boarder to make extra money."
"A boarder?" the brother mumbled nervously. "Not a drifter, I hope."
"With his insurance money, I should think not. He is injured and recuperating from an accident. I'm putting him in the guest room off the hall bathroom. I just painted it."
"Why would you put him in a second-floor bedroom if he's infirm?" he asked.
"His physical therapist looked over the house and recommended it."
Aaron jumped at his mother's elbow.
Uncle Eddie! Uncle Eddie!
Miranda threw out a caution before handing the boy the receiver.
"Aaron visited a petting zoo today, so he's rather wound up."
The nephew exclaimed.
I saw some bitty goats today, and some emus and monkeys. I brought some sunflower seeds with me, but the ducks rather chase me than eat the seeds.
"So I ran as little Jimmy Grimaldi ran the other day."
Aiden left many of his old sci-fi videos at the house when he moved away to college. Aaron committed random dialogue from them to memory. The boy's tendency to garble consonants was absent whenever he quoted from movies. His perfect diction bookmarked his acts of parroting. The uncle pushed the conversation forward. "Have you met the boarder, Aaron?"
Yes,
he answered gleefully. "Is he from out of town?"
very out of town.
the boy intoned. "What's his name?"
McElrinney.
Aaron referred to the actor who played Klaatu, the visiting space alien from the day the Earth stood still. Klaatu moved into a boarding house where he befriended a boy and his mother. The uncle sighed. "Is there anything else you can tell me about the boarder?"
"In matters of aggression, we have given them absolute power over us. This power cannot be revoked."
The boy's recitation was loud, but Miranda was still heard in the background playing with Amelia. Aiden tried another question. "Did you have fun at the farm?"
I did. I rode a pony and feed some pigs, Vietnamese pigs, and saw some bitty goats.
At first, this sounded like Aaron was mimicking an animal, but the uncle quickly realized something was wrong. There was no break for air in this discordance. The uncle panicked, fumbled. No human child could emit this noise. "Aaron?" he yelped.
The voice faded from the line, as if leaving the room where Miranda and Amelia's soft background banter continued, uninterrupted. Aiden spied his own house up the street. A light, no, a candle, ebbed away from one set of upstairs curtains to reemerge in another. A stamp of tread was heard, but he could not place it in Chicago or in the leaves around the payphone. The light trailed away with the last mischievous step, and a charged silence was left in the earpiece. It drew off dark, uninhabited rooms and made perceptible fact of itself only through an act of imagination. Had he chosen to ignore it, it would not have cloaked itself in a child's voice. Aaron was again heard, though away from the telephone and playing with his baby sister. Miranda's voice was clear. He must have dropped the phone, Aiden. You know how easily distracted he is. Is the boarder there with you? Asked the shaken brother. What? Is the boarder there with you now? I just painted the room, of course not. Aiden would not enlarge on his remark and listened inattentively while his sister completed the rundown of Aaron's birthday activities. She then reminded her brother about their parents being in Chicago for Christmas and that he should come home to see them. The conversation was wrapped up before the nephew's seizure could be mentioned, though the uncle could not honestly say what he heard. Darkness occupied every corner of the street, but the front step of his house was soon gained. He peeped from the foyer. Hello? Is there anybody there? Glare of a flashlight entered the stairwell, followed by the elongated shadow of a man carrying a toolbox. The caretaker was ebullient. Set the traps for you, he said, moving towards the back door without breaking stride. Sorry again about the power still being off. It should be on later this evening. Aiden tossed warier glances around him. Shadows in his vicinity resembled unexplored doorways, and perhaps those of a child's acquaintance.